Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. So in this video, we will be focusing on Lab 6E. That is what we will try to complete. Alright, and this particular lab is based on 2D arrays or two-dimensional arrays. Now, two-dimensional arrays are basically, you can say, an array within another array. So if you look here, it says int and then there's two brackets. Normally you would only have one bracket, right? But in this case you have two brackets. The first one represents how many rows you're going to have in in the 2D array, and the second one represents how many columns you're going to have. So this is one column, this is another column, and this is the third column. So basically, a 2D array is an array that is organized in the form of a table. If you look at it, it kind of looks like a table. And that's how you would basically write a 2D array also. All right, so in this case, there's a 2D array with each row having an array of three items, or the size of each array in each row is 3. All right, now this question basically it asks you to write a method called sum of square diagonal. So I'll just copy that quickly. Okay, that will be the name of your method that takes an input, a two-dimensional square array of integers. The method should return the sum of elements of the top left to bottom right diagonal. Now, before I explain to you what should be done, let's just create the method signature. The first thing you would write, like always, is public static, and then you need to figure out the return type. The method says it returns the sum of elements. So basically, it's only returning a number. If you want to look at it, you can see, okay, here you're calling this method sum of square diagonal, and in the result it's just displaying a number. So I would assume that it is an integer as a return type, and then the name of the method along with the input. So the input or the parameter basically is a 2D array, a square array of integers. So I can write the 2D array as int one bracket for the rows and the second bracket for the columns, and then I would name it, let's say, square. All right, and now what are we supposed to do? Now it says the method should return the sum of elements of the top left to bottom right diagonal. That means if it is a square, the first thing you would know that okay, for a square all the sides are same, right? So if we consider this as a square, this side has three numbers, right? 10, 8, and 10. This side again has three numbers, 10, 8, and 10. So this is considered a square because all the sides have equal numbers, right? But the second one is not considered a square because the left side is 10, 8, and 3, which is 10, 8, and 10, which is basically 3. And the bottom side basically is 2 because there are two numbers, right? So this is not a square. So if you have a 2D array which is not a square, all right, you have to just return 0. Okay, but if it is let's say if it is a square, then you have to find out the sum of all the elements of the top left to bottom right diagonal. That means all the numbers that are within the diagonal. So if I consider this as a square, this line is considered as a diagonal, right? So I need to find out the sum of all these numbers. Now, how would I know that? Basically, like I said, a 2D array is basically organized in rows and then in columns, right? So you can say that this number is at the 0 row, okay, and then the 0 column. This is, okay, so this is row 0, row 1, and then row 2. All right, and then this is column 1, this is column 2, and this is column 3. Now, if I want to pick this number, it's at the 0 row, all right, and then the 0 column also. If I want to pick this one, it is at the second row and also the second column, which means it's at the first index, first row index and first column index. And the last one, basically, which is here, it is at the third row or the second row in terms of index, and also the third column or the second uh, column in terms of index. So all the numbers at 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 2 is what you need to have. It's what you need to sum up. All right. So in that case, we can say that we can write a loop. We can say for int index is equal to 0. Index should be less than square dot length. It's the same way. If I want to get the length of the 2D array, it will be the same way. Plus plus index. Now I have to check that if, now this means we're at the first row. In the first iteration, the iteration for this loop basically means we're checking each row at a time. So one iteration means you're checking one row, one whole row. Now I want to check, I already have the square length, which is how many columns are there, right? But I need to make sure that the number of columns basically is the same as, no, okay, basically the square dot length will give you how many columns are there, basically, let's say it that way. All right. Now you're going to check if the number of rows that you have, is it the same as the number of, actually, one second, I think I said it wrong. What happens basically is when you write square dot length, it means, let me rename this to row so it makes more sense. It basically goes over each of the rows. So basically the length will tell you how many rows are there. All right. So how many rows basically are there. And then within those rows, you're going to check how many columns are there. So if I check it this way, if if square of row, so if this whole okay, so yeah, if this whole row that we're looking at right now, if it is if the length of this row basically is equal to the square length, okay, if the length of the row basically is the same as the square length, um, actually if it is not equal to the square length, that means it is not a square. It means that um, either it's this way, like the number of rows is different than the number of columns, all right, and that is in that case you have to return 0, right? So here I would just write return 0. Otherwise I want to add it to, I want to keep track of the sum, right? So in that case I would create a sum variable, okay, and then here I would write sum is equal to sum plus square row row, okay, and then finally I can just return sum. So what is happening here, it's saying that okay, if you are at the 0 row, okay, you have to go to the 0 row and then the 0 column also, which means go to, this means go to 0 0, right? So go to 0 0, whatever that number is, store it in sum. Go back, increment, and now row becomes 1. And if it is less than the square length, then again check if it is the same as if it is a square or not. Otherwise, go to now row 1 1 or square 1 1, which is here. So the first column or the first row and then the first column, which is here. Take that and add it to sum. So now the sum becomes 20. Go back, change row to 2. If it's less than the square length, then again go to the second column and the second row and add it to sum again. Now it becomes 30. So if we pre-check this, it says it's correct. Let's check, and it's correct. All right. So you just go over each of the arrays within the 2D array and you check if it is a square or not, which means if if all the sides are the same, meaning it has 3 rows and 3 columns. Or you can say if you want to know if it is a square or not, the rows and the columns should be the same. So these two values should be the same. And if it is not the same, in this case, how would we write it? You would write it as 3, here 3, and here 2. So in that case, it is not a square, and so you should return 0. Okay. Now moving on to the next question. It says write a method average multi. I'll copy that. That takes as input a 2D array of integers. The method should return a one-dimensional array of elements of type double that contains the average for each row. Now again, what they want you to do is for each row, you have to find out the average. So here, what is the average? Here, what is the average? And then here, what is the average? And you need to store that in another one-dimensional array. So basically, you would write it this way. Now you have to return a 1D array, so you would write it this way. And because they say it should be a double of type double, so I would write it this way. And then you have to put the name of the method, and it takes a 2-dimensional array, so numbers. Okay. Now here you have to figure out for each row what is the what's the average. All right. So in that case, again, we can start a loop. I can say int row. It's the same as the triangle question, if you remember. Int row is 0 row should be less than numbers dot length and then plus plus row. All right. And then within this row, that means when I'm on the 0 row, it's considering this whole line. All right. Now, yeah, it's considering this whole line. Now, one by one, I need to pick the values in each of the columns for this row, right? So that's again, I'm another loop, right? So I would say int column is equal to 0. Column should be less than numbers of row dot length, which means go to that specific row. Okay, this would mean, okay, numbers of row is basically at the moment, if row is 0, it's this whole thing, and you're saying what is the length of this whole thing. So you need to iterate for the whole row column by column. All right, and then I would write plus plus column. Okay, and then within this I need to keep track of the total for each of the row. So once I'm done with the first row, I need to refresh my total and then go to the next row. All right, so in this case I will keep the sum inside the first loop because for each row it needs to get refreshed, right? So double total is equal to 0. Or you can write, what you can do basically is write double total is equal to 0 here and then just refresh it here. Okay, now we need to store the average in a one-dimensional array. For that, I would create an integer array called let's say average, and the size of it should be the same as numbers. All right, so here I would write new int numbers dot length. Okay, now here I need to keep track of the total, so I will say total equal to total plus numbers of row and then column. All right, so if it's at the 0 row, it will go to the first column. It will keep iterating in this loop, and it will go to the first column, 0 row first column, 0 row second column, 0 row third column, and once it's done, it will go to the next row. Before going to the next row, you need to add the average to the array, right? I think it's best to have it as a double array because that's what we need to send back, right? So I would change that to double. And then I would write average of row is equal to total divided by numbers row dot length. Okay, and finally you have to return average. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so it says it's working. Now let's click on check. Okay, so basically what's happening, you're looping through each of the rows, all right, and you're keeping track of a total for each row. You're refreshing it when you start a new row because the average is different for every row. And then within the nested loop, you're basically iterating through the columns. And whatever the sum is for each of the numbers, you're storing it in the total variable. And finally, you're just calculating the average and storing it in the one-dimensional array and returning it once you're done iterating. Okay. Now, for the third question, it says write a method called average calls that takes as input a 2D array of integers. So I would copy that name and write it as public static. Now it says that the method should return a 1D array of elements of type double that contains the average of each column. Now you need to calculate the average of each of these. Okay. So here we would name it average column and it will take an integer 2D array. Let's name it numbers. And then here we need to find out the sum of all the columns. Oh, sorry, the average of all the columns, right? Which means the average of 12, 6, and 6, 12, 10, 8, and 6, 10, 14. So in this case, again, I would create a double for keeping track of the total. And then also I would create a double. Oh, sorry, I forgot the double array because we're going to send back a double one-dimensional array, right? So I would name it average is equal to um, new double numbers of 0 dot length, because we're going to assume that each row has the same number of columns. So if even if you take like the 0 column, how many ever sorry, the 0 row, how many ever columns are there, that would be the number of columns for each row. All right, and then okay, so now we're supposed to iterate again. Int index is equal to 0. or you can say int column, because we're going to start with we have to calculate the columns, right? So the column should be equal to 0, um, and then column should be less than, again, numbers of 0 dot length, and then plus plus column, and then refresh the total for each column. Again, for int row is equal to 0, row should be less than numbers dot length. Is that how, that's how you will get the row plus plus row. Okay, and then here you're supposed to say, you're supposed to write total is equal to total plus numbers of row, and then column. Okay, and then finally you would write numbers is equal to number, yeah, finally you have to write, you have to add it to the average array. So average of, let's say, column is equal to total divided by numbers numbers dot length. Okay, and then finally just return average. Let's see if this works. Okay, okay, so it was correct. Now click on check and let's see if it works. Okay, so that's correct as well. Now for the fourth question, it says write a method largest that takes a 2D that takes as input a two-dimensional array of integers. The method should return the biggest integer in the array. Very easy. You just need to loop through the array and keep track of the largest number. And so public static int, name of the method, takes a 2D array of numbers. Now create an int to keep track of the maximum value. Okay, give it a value as numbers of 0, 0. Initially, just assume that the first value in the 2D array is the largest. All right, and then starting your for loop, int row is equal to 0. Row should be less than numbers dot length plus plus row, and then the same code to iterate over the column. So column is equal to 0, column less than numbers of row dot length plus plus column. All right, and then here you would check if the max number that you have, or let's say the numbers of row and column, if it is greater than the max value, then you have to basically just change the max value. So max is equal to numbers of row and then column. Okay, and then finally just return max at the end. Okay, so numbers of row and column. Okay, let's see if this is correct. Yeah. Okay, so the same code that you would put in a normal array, now that you're just looping through two arrays to figure out if any of the to figure out which of the value is the largest. Okay, now this one, the next question is, Okay, so for this question, we're supposed to find out the second largest, and we can write it this way. So you have to name it public static, and then it should return the second largest double in the array. So basically, it's a double that you need to return the name of the method, and then takes as input an array, a normal one-dimensional array. Now, the first thing you need to do is if, after checking, I found out that if the size is not, if the array has only one element or no element, then you're supposed to print, please provide a big enough array. So to check that, sorry, we have to name this as numbers. So in order to check that, you can just write if numbers dot length is less than or equal to 1. Okay, we have to write system.out.println. Please provide a big enough array, and then you just return 0. Okay, because here it was 0. Now, otherwise, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go over the one thing you can use is the sort function. All right. So arrays.sort will sort your array in the ascending order, meaning from small to big. Once your array is sorted, your basically your second last index will have the second largest number. If let's try it that way. If it doesn't work, then we can loop. All right. So you can return basically numbers of numbers dot length minus 2. Let's check if this will work. I'm not sure, but let's see. Second largest, sorry, it should be numbers. Pre-check. My bad. This one has to be double because the method is expecting a double array. It takes an array of doubles. All right, pre-check. Yes. So automatically your second last element will be at the, because numbers dot length minus 1 will give you the last index, and if you've sorted it, it would mean that your last index has the largest value. So to get the second largest, you just need to move one index back, which means make it minus 2, and then you get your second index. I think this is a better way of solving it. If you want to loop through it without using the sort function, that's up to you. Try to do that, but I think this is fairly good enough. Okay, so that is your lab. Oh, did I check it? Let's check. Okay, so that's your lab 6E. Let me know if you have any questions.